Talkin TIDF.
Welcome back to another episode of Talkin TIDF. This is Cameron.
And I'm Stefanie.
This is another one of our post-TIDF episodes that we are sharing with our listeners. So what that means is the Taiwan International Documentary Festival, it already happened in early May. It was an amazing experience. We were really excited to meet many of you there. And now we're trying to provide a little bit of bonus content to supplement some of the things that you saw and maybe help people get an even deeper perspective of documentary cinema in Taiwan. Today, our guest is someone who has a really important relationship with the festival, having had his work screened there before, including at this year's festival, and has had a very large impact, I'd say, on the festival, as well as on larger Taiwan documentary cinema. And that is because our guest is LAU Kek-huat, a Malaysian-born documentary filmmaker now based in Taiwan. His film From Island to Island, which showed at the 2024 iteration of TIDF, was immensely successful. It had sold out seats across its showings, and then in subsequent screenings across Taiwan, it continued to sell out theaters. And it has since been shown to classrooms. Parts of it have been shown on television, and it's really started a number of interesting conversations regarding how filmmakers in Taiwan revisit and discuss Taiwan's experience during World War II. Stefanie, I don't know if you want to add a little bit of context as well, given that you were at the 2024 TIDF, and then also you've obviously seen how people have talked about it since then.
Yeah, maybe I would like to add that, of course, From Island to Island has been a huge success and has been talked about a lot. But there were also other films that LAU has made before, actually, both feature films and a documentary. And as you said, some of his documentary had been screened at the TIDF before and also won awards. One of the films that also I would maybe like to talk about today is The Taste of White Tomato, which actually deals also with recent Taiwanese history. So I think we have a lot to talk about in this podcast. Yeah. Maybe we should get started.
Welcome to the podcast, LAU.
Hello, everyone. I'm LAU. Nice to be here. Very happy to be here to do the sharing.
Whenever we have guests on the podcast, we always want to know a little bit about their relationship or experience with TIDF. So the first thing we would love to know is, when was your first TIDF, whether as an audience or as a filmmaker? And what do you remember about that year?
Yeah, actually, because of this question, I try to trace back and check. Yeah, my first experience with TIDF is with my first documentary, Absent Without Leave. It was nominated for the competition in 2018. The film was released in 2016, but it signed up for the 2 years later TIDF. So that was my first experience with TIDF. But I'm embarrassed to say, before that, I never really, being as audience to buy ticket, I was quite I would say, poor student at that time, because I studied filmmaking in Taiwan, but I don't really do a lot of film festival goers to buy ticket and watch a lot of films. So my first experience will be 2018, and during that year's Absent Without Leave won a Chinese documentary award and come with prize that actually helped me a lot to cope my financial problem at that time, because I was making my second documentary, The Tree Remembers. My account is like going bankrupt, like almost like zero. Then surprisingly, this award come, and then I can carry on with my second project.
That's always an amazing reminder of the fact that filmmaking takes money, and supporting filmmakers, sometimes it comes down to very, very practical things like awards.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting to hear. So then, since 2018, your films have obviously participated in the competition of a number of times. Do you also, when your film is competing, do you find the time to also go and see other films that might be more far afield, maybe even outside of the competition that your film is in?
Yeah, of course. Because once I'm a participant, they provided me with the participant pass, so that I can go and watch a lot of different kind of documentaries. I would say the selection of the TIDF itself actually helped me to open up my views, different kind of documentary. because my original ideas of documentary is like quite limited to like realisms, just capture. But then because the selection of the IDF include a lot of like experimental, hybrid, different kind of documentary, it actually helped me to develop how I construct or develop my following project.
From Island to Island has been, hugely popular since it was first screened in 2024. Well, it has been, as Cameron already said in the introduction, it has been often screened and has almost always been sold out. So there's been almost now 2 years of conversation or engagement on your film. Do you feel that the discussion on this film has kind of changed or evolved over the last 2 years? And also, maybe relating to that question, the film has been shown also abroad, and maybe it should be mentioned, maybe not all of our audience know the film. The film is an almost 5-hour long epic. So something quite special that also needs some dedication on the side of the audience. So it has been screened abroad, and I would be also interested in the audience reactions abroad. For example, it has been screened in Sydney, as far as I know, in Indonesia. Right?
Yeah.
And has it, I'm not sure, I tried to find out, but I'm not sure if it has been shown in Malaysia. That
Okay.
is, okay. So, maybe you can say something about that.
Thank you. Thank you for the questions. Actually, the film itself, it did show in Malaysia and Singapore as well.
Mm-hmm.
But first of all, I would say my experience with Q&A session in TIDF all the while is quite nice. I would say because there were many film festivals in Taiwan, like beside TIDF, there are also other film festivals. For my experience, the audience who go for TIDF screening and go for others is quite different for other film festivals. Like because they are here for the documentary, the audience came from like, it's not just festival goers. Some of them are social activists. Some of them are reporters, and they came from more social involved professional background. So they are more, when they come for TIDF, they are more ready to deal with reality, I would say, in that way. For the other film festival, it's more like tied up with the film industry, red carpet, and like movie star. But then audience for TIDF is very different. For my experience with for previous Q&A session from island to island is very nice because there are already a lot of interview published on the paper, on the online medias. So for those who willing to come and watch, in more or less, they are already kind of take up courage to face this hidden part of history. So they are already here prepared to dialogue. And also for me, it's quite happy. A lot of them actually is like young generations, 20 or 30 something. I do have experience screening this film in different countries overseas, including Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. But then I guess this topic, because the topic is about Taiwanese Japan soldiers involved in World War II, the most directly related would be Taiwan society. So of course, when I release this film, I will hope the dialogue most intensive where I expect to have the most often dialogue will be in Taiwan. So far, there is a lot of discussions. And if you compare the Q&A experience with different countries, it's very different. Beside Taiwan, the film also screened quite oftenly in Japan. So I was invited to Japan to do a lot of Q&A sessions and dialogue. And the discussion is not just about the film itself. They also like try to trace back different film or documentary in the history and how we project or how we show war and how we think of war memory and how this memory carry on transgenerational, and also how we can sometimes I was invited to talk with other documentary filmmakers. I will talk to historians in university. I also will talk to novelists or even different artists from different sectors. Like how we can help especially the younger generation to imagine war or think of war or carry this war memory. This is something that I experienced, especially in Japan, like this kind of cross-sectors dialogue. But in Taiwan, mostly it's like in area like TIDF, this kind of a documentary festival. a few universities actually invited me. And like I say, we do realize like the dialogue is easier for younger generation. If you go over like 40, 50 years old, like that generation of Taiwanese, because for them, those soldiers involved is their older generation. It could be like their grandpa or their fathers. So for them, it's even harder to take on this kind of topic. We realize from third generation onwards, for younger audience, it's easier for them because there's a distance for them. I mean, a memory distance. So that easier for them to cope with this and willingness to talk about it. I can share with you like some of the very special experience. In one of the location when I screened the film in Taiwan, there is an audience who raised her hand and then say, because she feel kind of like very stressed after watching the whole history, this hidden history. And then she start to say like, who do you think you are? I mean, like you are Malaysian. Who do you think you are? You can come and dig up our history. And this is a kind of provoking question that posed to me when I was screening in Taiwan. And then funnily, when I screened the film in Malaysia and Singapore, because it involved about Taiwanese soldiers' atrocities in Singapore, so there are very elders audience Singaporeans who come and watch the films. And then after watching the film, he is also kind of very angry and sad. I assume he has some families sacrificed during the World War II. So he is also very angry. And then he asked me one of a very tough question again. He said, you Taiwanese, now please tell me exactly how many Taiwanese soldiers were here during World War II. Like you see, this is very a very funny situation. It's the same film and the same filmmakers. But then when the film asks some hard questions, I would consider an outsider for both sides. Like in Taiwan, they call me, oh, you Malaysian, why you come and make about our history? Then when I was in Singapore, and then they say, you Taiwanese, explain yourself why you were involved in the Japan army. Why do you come to our country? Yeah, I guess this most of the time is the first reaction I receive after the screening. But normally, I mean, all those audience are sometimes they are enraged, angry, but just let them speak, let them express themselves, and slowly they will calm down, and still the dialogue can still carry on. And this is what I want to do, and the role that I want to do. I mean, try to bridge it so that when we look at the history, it's not like just nation centered. It's more like how we related to each other as human. Yeah, this is what I always looking for, and that's why I always enjoy Q&A a lot.
Yeah, I'm curious, just building off of that, because From Island to Island has you as a very, I'd say, active narrator, because you're also very open in your narration about your desire to figure out your relationship with the subject matter. One part that still sticks with me is how you talk about your son's question coming home from school about Taiwan's, role in World War II and how that sparked your own self-reflection. And so I'm curious, when you're getting audience reactions, how often do they explicitly react to your narration versus how often are they, do you think, reacting to the subject matter in general?
Yeah, sometimes I do face questions like when they ask, some audience will ask me like, when you make this film, you see yourself as Malaysian or Taiwanese? Like in what position you see in this history? Like frankly speaking, all the previous project that I made, I don't put the so-called the citizenship, the nationalisms on the very first position that I think about. Like most of the time I'll be like, this topic attract me as human being. And then this issue need to be said, need to be told. And then I will look into it. Along the way, when I make films, I already sense that there is a very tense relationship between the individuals and nationalism's narrative, like national narrative. Like official narrative always erase marginalized stories. This apply not only in Malaysia, in Singapore, in Taiwan as well. Those doesn't fit into the official narrative. They will just erase it or marginalize it or silence it. And I see myself, my duties as a filmmaker or a documentary filmmaker is to let those voices to be heard. I mean, those individuals' memories. I mean, it doesn't matter which country they came from, what race they come from, it doesn't bother me. It's more like as long I feel like their story need to be heard, and then I will try to hear it and let it be heard.
That's really a helpful clarification that I hope some of your audiences also get a chance to hear. Building off of that, then there's also very it's a specific but important audience for your work, which is other filmmakers. And you're also a teacher. And so you have the opportunity to teach about documentary. And I'm curious if you've gotten any feedback from filmmakers about how your work impacted their approach to either filmmaking or research or historiography, or just in general, how they're thinking about their documentary craft and their portrayal of the past.
Basically, I would, because I have quite a lot filmmakers friend as well. So those who will talk with me, especially when they also deal with similar topic or similar content, then we will talk about that. Like for example, like I'm quite close to Pan Quan and Junyi as well. So we do discuss about like their latest project, not Gan Lu Sui, the one following Gan Lu Sui, another project, because all the while they also have a lot of like Japan culture, Japan element in their films. So we do discuss about like after watching the From Island to Island, how do we think of, or how should we portray the so-called the Japan culture nostalgia? I mean, before From Island, it's like overall, Taiwan is quite a pro-Japan culture society. So we always think of this as like everything is nice or fine from the Japan culture. But after From Island to Island, I guess people are more aware, like culture. And beside this culture, also there's a part of a history when we were brainstorm and took part in the army atrocities. So, and it's not like we're going to say everything from Japan is wrong, is negative. It's like we have to be aware, like what kind of effect it brings as well when the imperialism come to Taiwan. So this kind of dialogue, this is something that, like I will talk with, Pan Quan, like when we discuss about how we can portray and how we can take certain distance in a way so that the audience can remain critical in a way, but still empathize with the subject as well.
No, I think it's interesting that you bring up this issue of representation and portrayal of the Japanese colonial period, because we're also recording this episode in a fairly significant moment in that just a week or two ago, Taiwan Travelogue won the Booker Award for a non-English novel that had been translated into English. And I think there's a lot of visibility for it right now, but also a lot of visibility where abroad people are becoming aware of the colonial past, but then it adds further complications in terms of how do you navigate that, how do you represent that, and how does that become part of contemporary culture as a result?
Yeah.
So layers upon layers.
This issue of nationality, I think, is a really interesting one. That's also one that I had been thinking about when I was preparing for this interview. And so actually Lau already commented on it, but I would like to maybe go back to it again by asking a question about the film, The Taste of Wild Tomato. That was a film in 2022, and it was commissioned by the Kaohsiung Film Archive. And so they asked you to screen a film on the topic, we can say, of the 228 incident. And well, we all know that the 228 incident is one of the major topics in recent Taiwanese history, also a very sensitive one. How did you feel when you, as a Malaysian-born Taiwanese filmmaker, were asked to do the film? And do you think that your position as being both an outsider and an insider has helped you to make or really framed your way of making this film?
Frankly speaking, when the film commissions start to contact me to make this film about 228, I actually reject twice, actually. Like I'm saying, oh, this is a very important incident in Taiwan. Why not you just find a Taiwanese filmmakers to make this film? And then they actually invite me twice, and then I reject twice. And then finally I say, okay, if you want me to make this film, please give me totally freedoms. Like just give me a lot, whatever kind of content. In the beginning, is the topic itself is just the 雄中自卫队. It's like the Kaohsiung defense high school. But because given freedom promise, so I expand the whole topics to be a bigger topics. Is Kaohsiung 228, the whole incidents, and also cover a bit about the Kaohsiung during the time Japanese occupations. And in fact, that was the first time when I researched and start to learn about the Taiwanese Japan soldiers. So the film actually expand from 15, original, it was 15 minutes project. And then I think 15 minutes is not enough to tell the whole situation during that time. So I expand it from 15 minutes all the way to 2 hours because we need to understand, the background of these incidents, where those people came from, what kind of education they received, how they perceive the world during that time. This is what I'm trying to do. So that's why the film itself expand from 15 minutes to 2 hours, because we need to know the importance of Kaohsiung during the time of Japan occupation, because it's such an important military base for Japan Army. And this is why it was bombed. And this is why it created a lot of attention, not only from the Alliance Army, but also from KMT Army, because it's such an important military base. And also for a lot of Taiwan soldiers, normally the last thing they saw when they leave Taiwan is Kaohsiung. A lot of them depart to Southeast Asia from Kaohsiung. The last look of their Taiwan, for them, the Taiwan is Kaohsiung itself. It's such an important element in their memories. So, like I say, at first, I reject the proposal twice. I say, oh, why not you go and find other Taiwanese? But then they give me freedom. And then they say, oh, they want to have outsiders to look at this incident in a fresh way. So during that time, I was like invited because I was not like Taiwanese filmmakers, more as an outsider, so that I can look at this thing in a more neutral or critical way, I would say. But for me, I do feel myself as part of this community. Taiwanese and Taiwanese filmmakers. But it really depends on how you understand so-called insiders or outsiders. When you mean insiders, means like you belong to a group of people. And then when you make films, you only say about good things, praising, compliments. If that is the insider that you mean, that is not the insider that I want to be. As a filmmakers, you always have to remind yourself, like, although you do belong to this community, but still it's still your duties to remain at certain position that you have to look at this thing in a very critical way. Yeah, it doesn't matter like if you're insider or outsiders. It's just what we have to do as a filmmakers. Like I say, the taste of wild tomato, it can be very easily made into a film that can serve certain nationalism's narrative, like seeing certain group of people as victims, and then to serve certain kind of nationalism's agenda. But for me, this is not the kind of film that I want to do. So in the film itself, I try to portray, I tend to see all those people involved, although they can be enemy to each other. But then I will see them as like stakeholders involved, implicated in these incidents. Whoever involved or influenced, implicated by these incidents, I will try to include all of them into this film. It doesn't matter like they come from different political standing or different political position. And this is normally how I make my films. Like, I would say I've watched 甘露水 as well. I would say like with the content of the 甘露水, it can be also very easily becoming a very nationalism serving narrative. But I'm very happy it didn't happen that way. And like Ban Quan and Junyi is very self-aware and try not to do that. So in a way, it remained kind of distant, but at the same time, it still empathize with the artist and try to tell the original ideas and the dream of the artist as an individuals, not as some person who need to serve his memory for a bigger history narrative. Yeah, this is something I quite appreciate.
We should add that the English title of the 甘露水 is The Daughter of Nectar. Actually, if I may, just one more question on that topic about identity as a filmmaker. As far as you know, two of your films, Absence Without Leave and The Tree Members, are still kind of facing censorship in Malaysia, but not from island to island or other films you've made, just those two films. I was also wondering, do they, in Malaysia, do they consider you as the Taiwanese filmmaker, or are you a Malaysian filmmaker then who was kind of touching upon these difficult things, or doesn't that play a role at all? And do you think that the censorship might be also maybe lifted at some time?
I will be doubtful. I mean, because those touch about even more sensitive issues, like because they touch about the communism's history in Malaysia. But back to the questions, like from island to island, they get past the censorship. That's why it can be screened in Malaysia. Back to your questions, when Malaysian audience, when they watch this film, would they treated me as an insider or outsiders, a Malaysian or Taiwanese? It really depends on how they receive this film. Like if they see this film as like challenging, provoking, trying to ask you some specific, very hard questions, they will see, oh, now you're becoming Taiwanese. But if you see the films like they can agree with certain ideas or position in this film, it's more comforting for them. And then they will see you as a Malaysian. I mean, this is how people differentiate whether you are with us or you are against us. But I would say, like I said just now, as a filmmakers, I always try to make films like to ask questions, I think, which is worth to be asked. Although sometimes this question could be hard and tough. Like, for example, when I make the Three Remembers, because it tackled about the May 13 incidents in Malaysia, 1969, which is a riot between two different ethnics, Malay and Chinese. And the major victims is Chinese. A lot of Chinese were killed. So during the time when I make the Three Remembers, it tackled about May 13 incidents, but I also include one part of the slavery history of Orang Asli, which is indigenous people in Malaysia, as the first front part of the film. So the film itself, the first front part is about the slavery by the Malay chief, Malay Sultan during the time. And then the second part is about the May 13 incidents, and also because caused by the so-called the Malay supremacist ideologies. Even when I released that film, although it was banned, still we do a lot of like underground screening in Malaysia without informing the authority, not like publicly publicize it. So it was still screened in Malaysia. For that films itself is kind of very challenging for Malaysian audience, especially Malaysian Chinese audience. So when they come and watch and then they say, oh, you are making a film about May 13. Why you include Orang Asli in this film? It has nothing to do with May 13. And then, so why you have to put these two parts together? Then I will ask back another question. It's like, because these two victims, I mean, the Orang Asli slavery and the Chinese that massacre during the May 13, there are two different group of victims. That's right. But I'm saying if I make this film into two separate documentary, would you come and watch for two? Or you are just going to come and watch for your own group as a victims? It means like Orang Asli victimized, they were killed as well. It seems like we don't bother much as Chinese Malaysian. We just bother about the history part that involve us, or especially when we were seen as victims, because it's a very easily convenient moral position, so that you can simply condemn the other side or blame the other side. But then whenever the narrative seems a bit challenging or provoking, then we try to avoid it. But I purposely made these two parts into one, simply because it's all caused by the Malay supremacy ideas. We are all victims of this supremacy. And then why we just see the part of our own suffering? We don't see the suffering of the others. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to say here is like, whenever I make films, I don't make comforting films. Like I tend to make films that ask questions, like provoking in a way, so that I always try to hope audience they can, when they watch the film as well, we can step out of our comfort zone, a step from it, try to think for the others a bit, especially that those community they are related to us. I hope it's clear.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I think that is what makes your films so fascinating, that you, well, take these different stances and really ask or almost force people to reflect and to adopt different views, not just, the easy one as the victim, but really also see other sides.
Maybe to transition back to this year's festival a little bit. As well as but I think still in this question of nationalism or nationality in different identities is for this year's Taiwan Spectrum, they did a program called War Memories, Shifting Identities, and it included archival footage from the Japanese colonial period, Taiwanese documentary, Japanese documentary, and then also they again screened from island to island. And I was curious if previous to making From Island to Island, had you seen any of those other films before?
I've seen some, but not all. Like some documentary about Taiwanese soldiers as well. But this time I did watch a more like compilation of the short films, Shiyang, like a few, even more, like because they have more well-organized compilation this time.
Then watching that in the wake of making and then also screening From Island to Island so much over the past 2 years, if it also gave you a new viewpoint or a new perspective on thinking about some of those same themes again.
Because although some of the footage I haven't watched before, but I knew it exists. I mean, I know about those films. And I would say this is a very nice move from TIDF. I mean, like, because the appearance of From Island to Island, so that it can help us to have a different kind of perspective when we look back at all those previous documentaries. Because like we discussed just now, before From Island to Island, before this, most of the perspective of the film is more like seen then as a victims of during the White Terror's period, which is true as well. But then we don't really ask what happened before that or how much they involved before that. So I guess this is a very good programming, I would say, like with From Island to Island. And then we try to look back with all the previous footage or documentaries we have, but with a more clear vision of overall what actually happened during the whole war. And then it's not just the like kind of victimhood nostalgia anymore. Like we can think more from that.
One thing that it helped me, because I didn't get to see From Island to Island in 2024 at TIDF. I saw it screened later at TFAI when they did a number of screenings at in their large auditorium, which was very helpful because I think again with the 5-hour viewing time, I appreciate having a cinema to consume it because I think my attention might go elsewhere if I was viewing it at home. It definitely helped to have an immersive experience, so there was an intermission. I will clarify that. And I assume most screenings it always does have the intermission.
It depends. It depends on the host. Like some overseas sometimes they split into two day screening, like first half and second half.
Yeah, screening definitely shaped things. But one thing I felt getting to see most of the Taiwan Spectrum program this year was watching those works also helped me clarify, I guess, the specificity of what you were doing in From Island to Island. It gave me a better sense of exactly what you were, because I guess From Island to Island being in 5 hours, you can feel, this is incredibly comprehensive and it gets everything. Though I know at different points of the film, you also gestured to the things that you wanted to include, but couldn't include. And it could obviously have been even longer. But I think also seeing a collection of films together that are talking about similar themes also shows you even more just how very expansive the topic can be and how many different ways the public discussion can go. But there was one particular screening of the film that I was interested in because it's actually the last time you and I ran into each other, which was at the youth jury training camp. So we've mentioned the youth jury a few times. It's this wonderful group of students from all across Taiwan who get to help pick the winner of the youth jury award. Prior to actually taking part in the selection process, they also get to go to this camp earlier in the year where they get some training on how to critically evaluate documentary. And I got to sit on the sidelines this year. I learned so much. even as an academic, getting to see what these students were learning. And they actually get to see an excerpt from Island to Island. And so I was curious how your experience, maybe screening it for youth jury, but then also screening it for other similarly aged high school and then maybe also university students, how that's also clarified your relationship with the subject matter.
Because like for last 10 years and 20 years, there are a lot of social movement overall in Asia. I mean, even in Hong Kong, Taiwan. So when we say about these young people, like around 18s or 20 something, this generation of young people, they actually grow up with more ideas or concept with so-called the social justice, restorative justice, transition justice. So they grew up with it. So but from my experience, the dialogue with this group of this generation of young people, they are more willing to talk and accepting this part of history, and they can really ask questions in a more critical ways, I would say. And but also this generation of young people is also the generation. Most of them, they have totally no memories of their family memories during World War II. Like if you ask them, to your families during the war, like your great grandfathers, how they involve, who they are. A lot of them, they have no memories at all. They can't even remember who they are, what really happens. And this is a more serious problem in Taiwan because of the White Terror for 40 years. And then, so the cross generation memories doesn't really pass down. So when they trace back their family memories, they can't really trace, like just father and mother memories, that's all. So they don't see themselves, their family position in the society. They don't feel that without knowing the family's memories will make them feel kind of like disconnect with this history. They don't feel themselves related to this history of this country, you see. They simply don't know. Because I'm doing a new project, like following Absent Without Leave. One of the things we do with the young people is we ask them all to go back and interview your families. What happened to your families during World War II? And then a lot of them come back surprisingly with a lot of findings. Like some of them will come back and surprisingly say, oh, I didn't know my great grandfather was soldiers. And then he was in Southeast Asia. And then after finding out about their family's history, and then they watch from island to island, again, they feel more burdened because they found one of their family members within Southeast Asia, and they see how it's related to the massacre or atrocity in Southeast Asia. Yeah. And I guess this is the way of how we can learn history, starting from individuals, and then how we relate to these families and then families' memories, and then how we relate to the biggest pictures of the history. Yeah, this is how we can find the relatedness and then the connectedness, so that this is how we can see that way. And adding on another point, like just now when we asked about the overseas screening, one interesting point to highlight as well, because there are a lot of overseas students from mainland China. So the Chinese student, they study in Japan. There are also Taiwanese students studying in Japan. And there are also like immigrants, like middle-aged immigrants from China, also from Japan or from different countries. Being in the third country, I mean Japan, they are more willing or more open to dialogue. Yeah, they are more willing to share about like the trauma experience they heard from their ancestor or their great parents. It's very interesting that Japan become the third party for these two different ends to meet each other. And they are more willing to talk about. And also because they are immigrants, by being immigrants, most of the time, because they have like experience living overseas, so they have more experience to have to face bureaucracy or anti-immigrants hatred or whatever the nationalisms. So they, in a way, immigrants, because they are immigrants, so they are, in a way, they are more liberal in a way. So more open-minded. So they are more willing to hear each other. And it's very touching when I hear like the mainlander students and the Taiwanese student, they exchange their history, experience, and what they are learning in Japan, especially at the time we're in Japan. And this also give me, I also have that kind of worry. Does that kind of dialogue, can we still have it in Taiwan? Like with the current situation? It is, but this is kind of dialogue we should try to cultivate or try to promote. This is like one of my experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great that film festivals bring these groups of people together, and that dialogue that is probably not possible to be had anywhere else is made possible in a film festival. Yeah, that's really something great. Your last film from 2025 was not a documentary, but a fiction film, a comedy drama called The Waves Will Carry Us, award-winning. So you're an extremely versatile director. Apart from the really hardcore documentaries on historic topics, you made this fiction film. Maybe just can you say why you would want to make a fiction film, and maybe what your experience was with it when you filmed it?
Normally I do both type, like I do documentary and fiction films. And my routine is always like I do a few documentary and then one fictions. I always see like documentary is one of the way for me to do research and to do field work. So my style of documentary is actually very similar to fieldwork. Whatever I research, whatever I think about, like how I reflect, I will try to show it in the documentary. But for people who go and watch fiction, it's more like they are tend to looking forward to more intensified or simplified narrative in a way, more dramatic narrative. I used to think like the content of the documentary, after you compress it, it become a fiction films. Like after you collect a lot of things from the documentary, different materials, and then you start to emerge one specific questions you want to ask the society. Like it compressed into one specific questions. Then I will move into fictions, and then I start to write a script. But to come up with that specific questions, it took a lot of time for me to digest, to think of it. So although it's a fiction film, it's a black comedy, but it still contain that very specific questions that I want to ask to the Malaysian society. Like although it's a black comedy, but the background story of it is a lot of dark and sad story. Like this is what I'm trying to do. When we screening in Malaysia, when people laugh at the screen, we laugh simply because we totally understand what are the things that not allowed to be talked about behind the screen. So we laugh about those comedy effects. Yeah, it's a very sad thing, I would say.
Well, I haven't seen it yet, but it's a film that I'm definitely looking forward to watch.
Yeah, because we do not have like totally freedom of speech in Malaysia like in Taiwan. Like we still have a lot of censorship in Malaysia. So a lot of the things that happened in the past, like traumatic things in the past, we are not ready or have confidence to talk about it publicly. So how we deal with it, this kind of memory, is normally we try to tell jokes. We try to force ourselves to be humor. Like this is it's a very traumatic effect. Like because we have no confidence, like all those unresolved incidents could be resolved publicly in a justice way. So we tend to like try to say it in a humor ways, or it's a very defensive way. And that is why I want to make it into a black comedies. This is exactly what we are now, the situation what we are now in Malaysia, because we don't see in the future, like probably government will unclassify this or try to deal with this. No. So we tend to see it like in a self-humor way. And this is why I'm making it into a black comedy.
Well, but maybe, humor is not the worst way to approach difficult topics. Yeah, I think we're sort of almost now at the end. Well, Cameron, would you?
Well, I'll ask a variation on the question that we used to ask before the festival was what recommendations people had for the coming festival. I guess I'll ask now in retrospect, were there any films outside of the Taiwan Spectrum series that you were able to see this year that either caught your attention or maybe surprised you or that I guess stuck with you?
Yeah, I'm very interested in especially this year, the focus is the Palestine, the archiveless archive. Yeah, I've been watching a lot of Palestine documentary even before, this year TIDF. I read about Palestine as well. Yeah, because it's a very, I would say, very dilemma situation for me. I was from Malaysia, and being a Chinese, we are kind of like marginalized because there's a Bumiputra Muslim law, like supremacy law. And in Malaysia, they always very pay attention to whatever happened in Palestine. Also, they support whatever in Palestine. But understanding the situation in Palestine, they're actually suppressed by Israel. So, growing up in Malaysia, I was like being kind of confused, like why Malay, you care for Palestine, but in our own country, you can marginalize the other group. It's like, it's contradict. Yeah. This is one of the reasons why I always interested in the Palestinian situation. Before, when I was in Malaysia, we tend to feel cold to Palestine issue as a Chinese because we feel surprised by the Muslim. Like we will say, oh, Palestine is nothing to do with us. But then when I after years I was living in Taiwan and give me a better view to look at this whole thing. So I start to care more about Palestine as well. And the way of how they try to fight and perceive their memories is very important, which is very similar in some situation in Asia during the Cold War. Yeah. And I would say that is a very good programming and worth to be seen as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you have many projects that you probably have to get back to. We hope to see you at a future TIDF. And we also hope to see interact with listeners at future TIDFs, given that this is going to be the last podcast for this year's series, at least. Stefanie, do you want to add anything else?
Big thank you to LAU for this episode and for being so extensive, and so it was so interesting to listen to that. And yeah, so all the best for the future, and also I'm very much looking forward to your future films. I hope to be able to watch those I haven't seen yet.
Thank you. I guess I will see you around in TIDF, right? Next year TIDF.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.